Good morning to our listening audience around the world. Hey, welcome to another segment of the World on Finance with Mr. Everett James. Good morning, Ev.
Yes, good morning. How is the reception?
It's excellent, excellent. Yes, yes. Remember last week, and you said you were going to do give us some information today.
Yes,
And I was asking the question:
yes.
who pays the tariffs? American consumers or the exporter?
The actually three groups, are responsible. First, the foreign exporters, and then secondly, the American importers, and the third group that we like to look at are American consumers.
Mm, okay. Oh, so it's actually a tax. It's an extra tax that we are paying.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. And as a matter of fact, it's an excellent question, William, because at one time, this country relied almost exclusively on tariffs and duty, as the second word is duties. But they relied on duties initially for the beginning years of our republic. But law was not really passed authorizing tariffs until about 1789. And then, of course, along comes the income tax in 1913. So that really provided a lot more revenue stream for the U.S. government.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I'm going to step aside and enjoy the show.
Okay, thank you so much. And this is Everett James, your trusty tax reporter. We come through to you on your airwaves at 10 a.m. in the morning on the West Coast. And on the East Coast, it's 1 p.m. every Wednesday. We look forward to your participation. Please call in or email us with questions and comments about the program. There will be a definite reward for you waiting. In order to do that, please call Everett James at 951-522-9877. That's 951-522-9877. And for those more disposed to the internet, EVJTAX1 at gmail.com. Just the number one, EVJTAX1 at gmail.com. And we'll be making every effort to repeat that by the end of the program. So here we are, December 10th. The only 3 weeks left before the end of the tax filing year of 2025. And as you may have heard, they will look for some type of delay in the filings, IRS filing tax season, primarily because of all of these changes, and hopefully most of them which should be considered as improvements. But because of all of the changes, IRS has to totally refit their programs and their services in order to meet the expectation of all of the new laws that got passed back on July 4th of this year, 2025. And that was with the signing of this bill, a huge, humongous bill signed by President Trump on July 4th of this year, called and nicknamed the one big beautiful bill. Okay, folks, as promised, let's do a short segment on import fees and on tariffs. Just who pays, those tariffs? Well, tariffs always seem to be on the mind lately. New tariffs being imposed, old tariffs being renegotiated, tariffs as a good thing, tariffs as a bad thing. But who has to pay all these tariffs? The tariffs, as I mentioned, the first tariff law was passed in 1789, and at one time it really made up the bulk of all of the federal income, really until the introduction of the federal income tax law in 1913, as I mentioned, and that allowed for less reliance on trade tariffs as a source of revenue. But there were times, as I mentioned in history, when tariffs for particular industries could hit almost 95%. In times before globalization and the modern levels of international trade, tariffs really did serve to protect fledgling and local industries, and it was more like a protection mechanism. They worked all right to that end. The end of protectionism really couldn't last forever, because that's when we started seeing the benefits of free trade, which set the tone for international trade around a century ago. And really, markets have been opening up ever since. The concept of tariffs hasn't gone away, though. While no longer setting the tone for trade or funding the federal government, trade tariffs are still political tools on the table today, as we've seen from our federal leader, Donald J. Trump. Only, if you want to know the truth, only around 30% of imports to the United States are actually subject to duty these days, are subject to tariffs these days. They have set up what they call the harmonized tariff schedule of the United States, and actually that's a list of tariff codes for everything that gets imported into the United States. The codes are usually hyper-specific, and the custom duties can change relative to the different codes. Plastic artificial flowers carry a different duty rate from ones made from feathers. For example, a human hair carries virtually no duty at all, despite having a tariff code. Having a harmonized tariff schedule entry doesn't mean that the duty, has to be paid in all cases. But just to keep things confusing, there are many things that wind up not, that get imported that are not hit with a tariff. Free trade agreements like the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement, called KORUS, KORUS, they ensure that tariffs remain at the fringes of modern international trade. Under KORUS, for example, 95% of the tariffs on goods between the two countries have been eliminated. Yeah, that's interesting, 95%. So it only applies to about 5% of the goods coming in from Korea. Now, tariffs may be confusing, but the good news is that there are really no tariff fees on a lot of trade these days. So don't forget to contact the custom broker to be sure of your tariff codes. Who pays the codes? Well, if what you're importing is not subject to a free trade agreement and is subject to duty or to tariff under the United States Harmonized Tariff Schedule, the importer of record must pay the tariff or duty, as they call it for short. The importer of record is not a singular defined person. It can be the owner of the goods. It can be the purchaser of the goods, or it can be the custom broker partner. But no matter what, it's someone involved in importing. If there's a duty to be paid and you initiated the import proceedings, the funds will come from you. Tariffs are almost never paid by anybody in the country that the tariff applies to. For example, tariffs on Chinese goods, for example, are not paid by Chinese firms. They're paid by American importers doing business with China. Now, to this end, tariffs impact trade indirectly. If you're an American importer, it's more attractive to you to switch to importing steel right now from South Korea. That's because as of this writing, as of this program, you'll avoid steel tariffs. Eventually, if enough American importers switch suppliers, the tariff will have an impact on the country's trade revenue. So basically, if you're importing a good that is subject to tariffs, you pay those tariffs in the form of in the form of duty to the Customs and Border Protection Agency. That's that. Tariffs on country of origin mean American importers need to double check, that category that they're paying a new rate. Okay, so to let you know before we dig into this subject any further, the tariffs subject is complicated. It's confusing, and changing tariffs are the activity of any importer. So if you need help navigating, don't forget you can talk to a customs broker at any time. So again, the three groups are the foreign exporter. The second group is the American importer. And the third group are consumers, USA, American citizens who consume the goods. Tariffs are a tax paid to our government by U.S. company that imports goods. So these businesses usually pass the added cost on to their customers, meaning American customers, you folks who are listening, and other U.S. businesses who ultimately bear most of the financial burden through higher prices. So who pays for the Trump tariffs? Well, President Trump routinely claims that foreigners pay his tariffs. That's not exactly correct. U.S. importers pay them. Over time, however, foreign exporters can be expected to bear a small but rising burden of the tariffs through price cuts, while most of the cost will be borne by U.S. consumers, which winds up being in the form of higher prices. So it's interesting, as we look, more deeply into the subject. From one perspective, despite the president's routine claims that foreigners pay the tariffs or duties, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency actually bills the U.S. importer directly. So it's the importer who pays the tariff. The importer, however, can't always try to get the foreign exporter to bear a part of the cost, hopefully by lowering its prices. The cost can also be passed on to U.S. consumers like you and me in the form of higher prices. So the more logical question at this point, folks, is to ask what portion of the importer's tariff costs are ultimately borne by it, either through lower profits margins, or borne by the foreign exporter through lower prices, or borne by U.S. consumers, you and me, through higher prices. A range of studies have tried to estimate the proportion of tariff costs borne by each of these three groups: the foreign exporter, the American importer, and the American consumer. It's interesting that going back to June, 3 months after President Trump's Liberation Day, you'll remember that as being April 2nd, Liberation Day. That was also nicknamed a tariff bombshell day. Most of the tariff costs at that point, about 64%, was being borne by U.S. importers, you and me. Only 14% at that time was being eaten by the foreign exporters, in the form of lower prices. And then at that time, about 22 of it was being passed on to U.S. consumers in the form of higher prices. Well, the by the time we got to October, however, of this year, the picture had changed considerably. Importers now bore only 27% of the that's American importers of the tariff cost. That's less than half the estimate for June, this last June. A slightly higher 18% was now being is now being borne, or was borne by exporters, and there's a much higher 55% was being passed on to consumers. So again, the logic behind these numbers seemed clear. By October, importers had some time to look out, to seek out, or reach out for alternative suppliers, giving them a bit more negotiating leverage with existing ones. Also, by October of this year, the administration had announced quite a few bilateral trade deals, or framework deals, as they nicknamed them in politics, and it made clear that substantial tariffs were here to stay. That is, that we were not going to be bargained down to zero or single-digit levels. This gave importers and retailers good reasons to pass on more of the tariff costs to consumers. Now, projecting forward to the middle of next year, to the middle of 2026, we can now expect importers, tariff importers, to bear only 8% of the tariff cost. That's the many people's projections. However, by that time, they will have had far greater opportunity to seek out lower cost suppliers, giving them more negotiating leverage. We can therefore expect the exporter burden to rise, and that's the foreign exporter burden that we typically to rise to about 25%, and our consumer share to about 67%. But that has been predicted, for some time. That granted, our grand president did, herald the fact that the expectation that the consumers, that the foreigners would be paying the tariff. Well, no, it's really the majority of the tariff share is being burden, is being handled and being paid now by just American consumers, out of the three different groups, being the foreign exporters, American importers, and the American consumers. So in the end, though, our consumers will really bear, very frankly, the greatest part, roughly 2/3 of the Trump tariffs, unfortunately, not the foreign exporters. The inflation contribution of tariffs should continue to rise heading into the next year, which is just right around the corner from 3 weeks from now, folks. Provided that inflation expectations do not become unanchored, inflation should then moderate by the middle part of the year, with the price level about 1.5 percentage points higher than it would have been without the Trump tariffs. So of the three groups, it'd be interesting to see what actually happens. I mean, what do these three groups, wind up actually bearing the cost? How are those percentages going to going to turn out? And there's a lot of predictions about those about the percentage of cost that those groups will have to shoulder. But it looks as though the expectation will be about 2/3 of those tariffs are going to be paid by American consumers. And as I said, they really do. We really do have the expectation that the share of costs are going to around. They're predicting around 67% of the Trump tariffs, the cost to be burdened by American consumers. And of course, they're expecting the percentage of the burden of the tariff burden will increase for foreign exporters, and will increase with the American consumers, and they are expecting a reduction in the actual cost borne by American importers. So we will keep you up. Really, this is going to change as time goes on, and this reporter will make an effort to try to brief you on what percentages of the three groups: the foreign exporters, American importers, and American consumers, what relative percentage each one of those groups are shouldering in order to pay for the tariffs, to the cost of the tariffs. Okay, folks. Again, we would invite your participation, and please attempt to, or at least contribute to this program by contacting this live radio podcaster, Everett James, at 951-522-9877, or email evjtax1@gmail.com. There will be a reward for all those listeners who call in. Before we get into some of the meteor subjects, I just want to do another shout out for a local baseball team for 9 and 10-year-olds. It's been in existence really for approximately 2 years, since 2023, called the Riverside United Baseball Club. They are all from families from lower income groups, but they apparently have been winning so many games that they've gotten invitations from out of state, and they've currently have just received the good news that they've been invited to a tournament in Arizona, and the tournament itself was good enough and big-hearted enough to pay for the hotel costs and the registration fee for the team. So please, folks, for those of you who may be baseball fans, let's give these kids out here in Southern California a heads up and some support. They're looking for really a form that comes in dollars as well as in-kind support. Please, if you, particularly if you're a baseball fan, please consider buying some things that they really need, pretty badly, and that's the uniforms, cleats, helmets, team jerseys, batting gloves, and also matching equipment bags. They would, if you just want to help fund those purchases, um, or if your heart is deep enough to provide funding for the hotel rooms, please call the manager and her husband, Jason and Cicely Wooten, Wooten. Their phone number is 951-534-3838. Easy number to remember, 951-534-3838. Thank you. The we'd like to just see if some of the um, news media has been keeping up with their comments on the ongoing issue with funding Medicaid or Medi-Cal in California, but funding national federal medical programs to citizens, to rather non-citizens as well as citizens. And there are a number of articles which make make that very clear. The And so, in order for unfortunately, a lot of the state governments have been hiding deficits that have been created because of the additional funding for persons who are not here legally. For example, in California, article in the Southern California News Group dated June 29th, just this year, entitled "California Budget Deal Cooks the Books to Hide the Deficit." Well, who ever heard of those kind of deals? You know, the legislative leaders out here in California, they'd have us believe that the 2025-26 budget agreement they forged with Governor Gavin Newsom was noteworthy, even heroic, in a response to financial problems caused by factors beyond their control, what they say beyond their control. While with the government's January 10th proposed budget being balanced without needing new solutions, they claim in California, unfortunately, since January of this year, circumstances have changed. California now faces a significant budget shortfall. Now, how did that all happen? Well, first and foremost, the policies, according to some politicians in California, they've supposedly, from the federal government, supposedly caused economic forecasts to be downgraded. Well, it goes on to cite, to a modest degree, the baseline costs of key programs, particularly Medi-Cal, which is another name for Medicaid. Those costs have grown faster than projected. And in addition, to a smaller degree, the devastating LA fires have had negative economic impacts and increased state spending. Well, that scenario about the fires and other things causing the increases in the deficits, that's not actually factual. The governor and the legislatures have been overspending revenues for 3 years, ever since the governor just declared that the state had almost $100 billion surplus. That's long before the fires hit LA and Trump was inaugurated. Governor Newsom's revised budget started the blame it on Trump routine syndrome, and legislative leaders quickly embraced it to explain away their chronic failure to either reduce spending or raise taxes to balance income and outgo. Okay, so again, folks, I'm sure this is the case in many states, if not all of the states. The tendency to blame it on Trump and use that to explain away their chronic failure to either reduce spending or raise taxes to balance income and outgo. It's a condition known in Sacramento, California, as a structural deficit. Thus, all the versions of the budgets, including the semifinal one unveiled last June, would fill the gaps for another year with so-called payment deferrals, getting loans, accounting gimmicks, and raids on reserves that were really meant to cushion the effects of genuine emergencies. The accounting gimmickry takes several forms, such as delaying a $2.3 billion in support payments to community colleges and local school systems that are due in June 2026 until a month later, thus shifting from one fiscal year to another. The officials call such maneuvers solutions, but really they don't solve anything. They merely stave off the day of reckoning when officialdom runs out of tricks. That day will probably come after Newsom has left the governorship and is perhaps running for president. So, were a private corporation to cook its books like the state governments do, its executives could wind up in jail for fraud. For some same reason, however, California voters continue to tolerate the Capitol's chronic fiscal malpractice. The folks, I'd like to just focus for a few moments on the program to the OBBB, the one big beautiful bill that got passed on July 4th of this year. It brought such big changes for taxpayers in all of our states. The older adults and homeowners in high tax states will benefit, but many of the energy saving credits will just simply go away. So they looking at an article, that was published recently. The fact of the matter is that there are so many changes in this one big beautiful bill that it really does bear repeating just to keep you up to date, and particularly when we're coming up, we will soon be coming up to tax filing time. So you can make changes in your financial structure and your financial behavior, if you will, to take advantage of some of these changes. The one big beautiful bill did include tax breaks for really an expansive range of taxpayers. At the same time, it scrapped credits for energy saving vehicles and home improvements. More broadly, the legislation makes the tax cuts in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Act permanent. That means that, pardon me, the tax rates will not increase after 2025. Let's see how those have affected older adults, homeowners, car buyers, families, workers. For older adults, starting in the for the 2025 tax year, those who are 65 or older will be eligible for an additional standard deduction of $6,000. And I do um, urge folks who are listening, if you have a way to record some of these improvements in the law and jot them down on this piece of scratch paper, or um, you're welcome to record, my presentations. They For older adults who are 65 or over, they're eligible for an additional standard deduction of $6,000. And the reason I mentioned you jotting down some of these changes and improvements, because recognizing all of the changes and how many they are, it's really, really hard to commit all of these to surefire memory on your part, and for my part too. Um, and not really, in many cases, after submitting a tax return, recognizing that there were a number of areas that you totally overlooked. So for older adults, you get that additional standing deduction of $6,000. Look for it on your tax return. It will show. That bonus deduction comes already on top of an existing increase in the standard deduction. So the standard deduction, it goes up for 2025 for $2,000 for single filers. And for those who are 65 or older, if you're filing jointly, is $1,600 for each spouse 65 years of age or older. The expanded deduction means an eligible taxpayer with the filing status of single will be able to deduct up to $23,750. Make sure that if you are single, that your deduction for your standard deduction, if you're single, shows up on your 1040 as $23,750. While a married couple will qualify for a deduction for if you're not itemizing. But make sure, check on your first page one of your 1040 to make sure that if you're married, the $46,700 shows up on your 1040 for 2025. And that's assuming both are 65 or older. Okay, the deduction starts to phase out, though, for couples with a modified adjusted gross income of more than $150,000. And that's for single individuals, and for married couples, it's higher. The modified adjusted gross income phase out. Actually, for married folks, is $150,000 for married folks. For single persons, it's $75,000. Those are the modified adjusted gross incomes, at which you would no longer be able to get the highest deduction for the standard deduction. So the new standard deduction is available for 2025 through 2028. So again, the deductions are very, 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 very liberal. And keep in mind that there are those phase out amounts. Please contact your tax advisor or preparer to make certain that you're claiming the corrected amounts. So again, for A single person, standard deduction, you'll be able to deduct up to $23,750, while a married couple will qualify for a deduction of up to $46,700. Wow. And then, of course, there are the phase out amounts, which I will definitely recommend that you contact your tax preparer, CPA, or other qualified tax practitioner, just to be sure that you're claiming the correct amount. Oftentimes, incorrect amount claiming on tax returns are the reason that they're flagged, and in some cases, your refund, if earned, is delayed. Okay, the legislation did not eliminate taxes, unfortunately, on Social Security benefits. But by lowering taxable income, it will reduce the number of beneficiaries who pay the taxes, and it lowers that all the way from 36% to 12%. That's huge. For homeowners, the property tax deduction, as you undoubtedly have been informed previously, if you're a homeowner, you'll be able to deduct. If you're itemized, you'll be able, on Schedule A, you'll be able to deduct up to $40,000 in state and local taxes. And that was increased from the $10,000 allowable through 2017. So it's been increased by $30,000. Wow. That also has a phase out amount for homeowners with for who are married, and that phase out amount for homeowners who are married is $500,000. That's the phase out amount at your modified adjusted gross income, and that's $500,000 for married folks and $250,000 for a married individual filing separately. So you'll want to keep that in mind. The credits for energy efficient home improvements, as I had alluded to earlier, many of them have been phased out. The credit, for example, for energy efficient home improvements, such as rooftop solar panels, the credit for that improvement, that expires at the end of this year. Folks, that's what, 3 years from now, 3 weeks from now. The residential energy credit provides a 30% tax credit toward the cost of buying and installing solar panels or solar water heaters or other energy saving measures. They were previously scheduled to phase out in 2033, but that was definitely dumped with the change in political administration from the Democrats to the Republicans. Now, to claim the credit on your 2025 tax return coming up, you'll need to get to work right away and have that already set up and at least started by the end of the year, by the end of this 2025 year. For families, there's been an extension of the child tax credit. Well, the bill permanently extended the child tax credit and increased the amount of the credit to $2,200 per child, up from $2,000. So it was $2,000, and it did get that just a very, very, I was surprised it was so low, a moderate increase of $200. So now it's per child $2,200. the there's a savings account that's been set up for kids. The new law, OBBB, it creates a new tax advantage savings account for your children. Until the child turns 18, parents, grandparents, and others can contribute up to $5,000 a year, $5,000 a year to this special savings account. And the money is invested in a fund that tracks a stock index and grows tax deferred. Parents of kids born between January 25 and December 31st of 2028 will be eligible to receive $1,000 in federal seed money to start the account. So that's for kids born between January 1 of for this year and the end of December in 2028. That's actually 4 years. Will be eligible to receive that $100 in seed money to start the account. The car buyer. Just to let you know that the percentage of Social Security beneficiaries who will pay tax on their benefits following changes to the standard deduction for older adults, compared with 36% currently, according to the Council of Economic Advisors. And at one time, before this bill, it was 36% of beneficiaries who paid tax on their Social Security. Well, because of the OBBB, it's dropped from 36% of beneficiaries who will be required to pay tax on the Social Security. That's dropped from 36% of the beneficiaries down to 12% of the beneficiaries. Wow. A deduction on car loan interest. Boy, that takes us back to the former years of Schedule A submission, where if you were buying a car, not leasing it, folks, but if you are buying the car, taxpayers are eligible to deduct up to $10,000 in interest on loans for cars purchased between 25 and 28. So basically 4 years. You don't have to claim, by the way, you don't have to claim this deduction, but I don't have to itemize rather this deduction. So you can claim it even though you still take just the standard deduction and not itemized. But it's available only for loans taken out to buy new cars assembled in the United States. Has to be assembled and put together in the United States. The deduction phases out for individuals earning more than $100,000 or married couples making over $200,000. So for individuals, this deduction phases out for you, and if you have over $100,000 as a single person, or if you're married and you folks are bringing in over $200,000, then you get phased out on this this benefit. For those who had thought about applying for the $7,500 tax credit to buy or lease electric vehicles, so sorry, it was too late. Along with the $4,000 credit for eligible used electric vehicles, that ended September 30th of this year. So it's too late for that one. Folks who are receive income from tips, eligible tipped workers will be able to deduct up to $25,000 in tips this year from 2025 through 2028. What about overtime pay? Again, highly publicized during the Trump's campaign. From 2025 through 2028, workers will be allowed to deduct up to $12,500 a year in overtime pay, or if they're married and filing jointly, and say the wife is receiving overtime pay, they can deduct twice that amount, a total for a married couple of $25,000. That would go on your tax return as not being taxable. The deductions for charitable givers are shifting. Starting in 2026, taxpayers who do not itemize can deduct up to $1,000 in charitable contributions, or $2,000 for married couples. Now, I don't want to get you mixed up, so trying not to provide information on special deductions covering 2026 when we're just about to start our huge tax year for 2025. So, but I only let you know about the one starting in 26 because obviously, if you want to take advantage of the full benefits, you need to start beginning in 2026 to starting with the idea that you can deduct up to $1,000 of your charitable contribution for the tax year 2026. That deduction, and I'll only mention it once because I know you're going to need to, stay in touch with your tax preparer. But starting in 2026, the deduction is limited in the amount of the charitable contribution, and you can only deduct the amount that exceeds half of 1% of your adjusted gross income. Oh boy, I'm sure you'll need to get that repeated. Half of 1%. So just the amount exceeding half of 1%. It's we only have 3 more weeks left for you to do anything about impacting the results on your 2025 tax return. So take it, but make sure that you have done things that will help qualify you for the expanded deduction. I've mentioned already the senior tax deduction of $6,000 for singles, or $12,000 for married folks who both qualify as being older, 65 or older. That's on top of the standard deduction, which is $15,750 for singles, and $31,000 for married couples. So I mean, these are huge breaks. So you can claim the tax breaks, whether or not you itemize. Again, for 2025 this year, you have all of these increases in deductions on top of the standard deduction, which is $15,750 for single people, or $31,500 for married couples filing jointly for 2025. And then an existing senior deduction of $1,600 per person. Added together, older married couples filing jointly, they get the the major booming break. They could get a total of $46,700, adding up all of those deductions that I have mentioned. And the bonus is that you can claim the new break whether or not you itemize those breaks, whether or not you're not. Now, keep in mind that not all old taxpayers qualify. The new deduction phases out, unfortunately, for single folks with a modified adjusted gross income of $75,000, or for married folks, $150,000 for joint filers. And it disappears once you hit a modified adjusted gross income of 175 for singles, 175,000 for singles, or it's $250,000 for couples. And the keep in mind that the expanded sales and tax deduction up to $40,000 for 2025 compared to $10,000 last year. Does have these mega phase out amounts, as I mentioned. Phases out, for a mega of $500,000 for anyone. So you need to check with your tax advisors on the phase out amounts. I don't want to repeat it again. Because I need to have you confirm those with your tax advisors. If you're still working, increasing your pre-tax contributions to retirement plans and health savings accounts, they can help. Maybe you can postpone a bonus until next year and prepay your deductible first quarter 2026 property taxes, if allowed, for itemizers planning charitable giving. Make a larger tax donation this year. Avoid moves that inadvertently increase your income enough to disqualify you or reduce the value of your tax breaks. Be cautious with Roth conversions. The rationale for doing a Roth conversion is more complicated this year. With this strategy, in converting to a Roth, you shift money from a traditional IRA funded with pre-tax income to a Roth IRA funded with after-tax income. That creates a bigger pool of tax-free money for you to enjoy in retirement. The problem is, by pulling money from the traditional IRA, you may raise your taxable income significantly, which winds up disqualifying you for the key tax breaks that just got passed. Once you get above certain thresholds, you may lose deductions and end up paying a higher amount of taxes. To keep your income under the phase-out thresholds, you could spread out smaller conversions over several years instead of making the switch all at once. Or time your conversions to a year when your tax rate is lower. Perhaps when you have retired but haven't yet started taking Social Security benefits or the required minimum distributions. And of course, grab this energy credit while you still can. If you move fast, you may be able to claim that energy efficient home improvement and residential clean energy credit that ends on December 31st, folks. And how long is that from now? 3 weeks. That provides you with a credit of up to 30% of the cost of the energy efficient windows, heat pumps, or other improvements within certain limits. If the fixes are installed and operational by the end of the year, you can claim those credits, but keep in mind, they got to be installed and operational by the end of the year. Nab a state tax break. You want to set aside money to help pay tuition and other costs for college-bound kids or grandkids. Trim your state tax bill at the same time. Follow this. Contribute to a 529 savings plan on their behalf before the end of this year. More than 30 states and Washington, D.C. provide a state tax deduction or credit for a 529 plan contribution. That's to your own state plan. Money that you save in these accounts grow tax-free and the withdrawals are tax-free if used for qualified expenses. So you want definitely, before using the money for a particular purpose, contact your tax practitioner just to be certain that is tax free. Make a date with a tax pro. So, other things that you should do at this point: 3 weeks off. It'll be too late to do anything about 2025. Um, Adjust your withholding if you have an employee arrangement, if you're at work. While you're at it, recalculate your estimated tax payments that would take place in 2026 for 2026. The start of the year is always a good time to revisit how much tax is taken out of your paycheck, Social Security, or IRA. And you can use your Social Security as a way to have withdrawals as well as your IRA withdrawals. So keep those in mind. You don't have to take it all out of your wages. Reset your retirement contributions. Retirement savers can take advantage of the increased contribution limits for both regular and catch-up savings for people 50 or older. But few people actually save that much. Only 14% of participants maxed out their regular contributions last year, and only 16% of eligible savers set aside the maximum allowed for catch-up contributions. That's according to Vanguard. A big reason is inertia, as many savers stick with their default contribution rates, often 6% or less. So dial it up, increase it. Okay, folks, it looks as though we have finished with our session this week. And again, contact me for questions and comments at 951-522-9877, or send us a message at ebjtax1@gmail.com. Good luck, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
All right, sounds good. And you can check out Ev, like he said, every Wednesday, 10 a.m. on the West Coast, 1 p.m. on the East. Enjoy your Wednesday. As a matter of fact, come back tonight for Cultural Excellence with yours truly, new music and old school classics. Kick back, grab a glass.